Great.
Great. Well, first of all, Marjorie, I just want to thank you for inviting me to come in today. What I want to talk about today is I want to have a dialogue with you. I don't want to just kind of present facts and figures and things like that. So I want to kind of, get everybody involved with the conversation that I want to talk about. One of the things is, just for my background, I was on the school committee 20 years ago, actually. I started my term in 2003 for 3 years, one term, and then one term on the city council. So 5 years experience. What I've been doing is staying involved with the city in terms of the government, the budget. Over the last 20 years, I've kind of created a database by line item of every single line item in the city, and I have a Excel spreadsheet. And what I like to do is just analyze the trends, what's been going on in the city. And I've been doing that for now a period of 20 years. And, what I want to talk to you about is go over some of the things that I've seen that to me have been very alarming over the years. And, so first to start it off, I just want to ask a couple of you, what do you think is the biggest issue in the city? And a couple of people just tell me, just shut out. What do you think? What's the biggest issue in the city?
Spending.
Debt. What do you say, spending? Anything else?
Some of the spending that's resulted in legacy costs we can't afford, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
ARPA money, that kind of stuff.
Yep. Okay. I mean, those are all great answers. Some of the things that I've taken a look in my notes is that, I look at this year's city budget. Our spending increased $10 million. Now, I don't know if you know what a maximum tax increase gets. It gets us about $8.6 million. Under this budget, we have a $10 million structural deficit. So does everybody understand when I say like a structural deficit, what that is?
$10 million less dollars to run the city on regular.
Yeah, well, what we're doing is we're taking money out of our rainy day fund because we don't have enough revenue to cover for all our spending. What they could have done is raise taxes even higher, but they didn't do that. We're selling another school building, I think, for like $2.5 million. So, we've been going along and spending all this money that we really don't have. And I think everybody knows, like, in the last 4 to 5 years, we haven't got any tax increases, right? But, just under Mayor Picozzi in 3 years, his spending's gone up $33 million. I mean, think about that for a second. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But, that's some of the things that I want to get into. The spending's one of the things. We're going to talk about new schools. And, the other thing I want to talk about is this is a political group, so I can be political. I'm not usually political when I have these meetings, but I think I should be political. And what I want to talk about is how I think this group and the Republican Party can maybe help save Warwick. And I think some of the things that we have to take a look at is what's happened in the past. And I want to take a look at something that, I call it the crisis of the moment. This is something that it's been the philosophy and how we've run the city of Warwick. And it's not only from, I'm going to bring up the former mayor and everything, but it's the Democrat council, it's the current administration right now. Nobody looks to the future. The future to these people is 1 year in the future. And I want to play this for you. This is a clip that I want to play, and hopefully you can hear it.
Municipal budgeting these days, he's had to trade tomorrow for today.
I mean, think about it. You have, every time you hit a bad budget cycle, it is, I need relief from where we are today. And that's how you end up getting additional holidays, additional benefits, additional perks, because there's no cash to give out that time.
Did you think you had leverage a year ago in February, or did the unions have more leverage?
I think we had more leverage the last time.
And were you satisfied with what you extracted from that contract?
We wanted more, but it got us to where we needed to be to balance our budget for last year.
Mayor Avedisian tells us the next negotiations may be sooner rather than later. He plans to call all 3 city unions together later this month to see if he can get some more concessions to help balance this year's budget. In Warwick, Jim Hummel for the Hummel Report.
So this was back in 2010. And, so when you hear the words trading tomorrow for today, what does that mean to you?
Robbie needed a big haul.
Yeah. It's like we're not concerned about the future. I mean, you heard what the former mayor said. What he was talking about is we need to get through this budget year, right? So we give out more benefits. We do this, we do that, and nobody cares about what the effect that those decisions are going to be. It's happening right now, and I'm going to show you that. So, what's the results of this policy? In 2007, I don't know if you all recall it, I've been living in the city almost 30 years now. We probably have, people that have been living in this city for a long time. I don't know if you remember, in 2007, we had a $25 million bond to fix up the school buildings. Anybody remember that, voting for that? That was frozen back in 2007 for years. It was probably close to 7, 8 years where they just stopped maintaining the schools. Did anybody have any kids or grandkids or whatever that went to Pilgrim High School maybe 10, 15 years ago, right? Pilgrim's High School's roof was leaking. Do you remember that? I remember going in there. They had buckets to catch the water. The city decided, we can't spend any more money to fix up our school buildings. And what happened, right? They deteriorated more and more, and now we need, two new school buildings, they're saying, for over $350 million. Road repaving. I analyzed the road repaving budget over the years. They just about eliminated it for a period of almost 10 years, right? You guys travel the roads of Warwick every single day, right? How's your ride? Right? It's terrible, right? I mean, if you ever go to a city council meeting, I feel bad for the poor people that have blowouts and things like that, and the council won't even pay for their bills. But, we eliminated that. Now, what they're doing at the budget now for road repairing, we used to pay for it under the general budget. No, we're using bonds. We're using opera money. We can't even pay for our roads. Sanitation and vehicle replacement. We delayed that for years, right? What happened? We had all the trucks broken down. We didn't have the vehicles that we could, do what we needed to do just to pick up the trash. Did anybody know back in 2011, before that, we had a youth services department as part of the budget. They eliminated it. You know what this was about? After-school programs for kids, programs for at-risk kids, right? That program's gone. It's been over a decade since they got rid of that. We had a family services budget in 2013, gone. That supported families that were struggling in the city. And, when I was on the council in 2007, they had a program, it's called the Night Program. What happened is if you had problems in your ward, you can call the police department and say, the kids are kind of hanging out in this area, North Country Club Field. Can you patrol extra patrols? They had money that they could do that. That's gone. You can't do that anymore. And what I want to show you, so where did all the money go, right? In the last 20 years, I told you I've been taking a look at it in the last 20 years. This is a chart that shows in the city budget for 20 years, I guess it doesn't work to point it, $71.5 million new dollars went to run this is the city budget now, it's not the school budget. But what's the thing that really is alarming when you take a look at it? 45% of the new dollars, $32 million, went to pay for retired employee benefits, right? That's more money than the active employees. Think about this for a second. In 20 years, everything else in the budget, $7.7 million. That's an average of what, $400,000 a year? Think about that for a second. Everything else to run the city, if we want why don't we have new programs, new services? Why can't they cut the ball fields? Why can't we have good, clean recreation areas? There's no money to do it because it's going to this. So that's the effect of crisis of the moment, right? Budgeting, trading tomorrow for today. This is what happens when something like that. So let's fast forward. What's the current mayor and the city council doing? They've just come up with a new program, and I've been talking about this, and I know I've seen some of you over there. I had another presentation. They're going to divert tens of millions of more dollars, new tax dollars, for another program to fund retired employee benefits. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So in the next 9 years, they're going to need $68 million. This is called an other post-employment. I don't know if you ever heard of the jargon. It's called OPEB, other post-employment benefits. It's going to cost taxpayers $68 million to fund that. Yeah, retire. I want you to think about this for a second. That last slide I showed you, I said we spent $71.5 million over the last 20 years in the city budget on everything. Everything. In the next 9 years, half the time, we're going to spend $68 million on one thing, retired employee benefits. Does that make sense? If I told you in the next 10 years, it's going to cost you double the amount for you to live than what you paid in the last 20, you would probably be alarmed at that for one item. For one item. And that's what's going on in this city budget. So, but this is the same kind of philosophy I'm talking about, like the crisis of the moment with former Mayor Avedisian. It's spilled over into the current administration right now, and it's spilled over into the city council. And nobody seems to care about common sense things like this. I think the reason I'm coming here today is I don't think people are aware of this, and we need to make people aware of this. I mean, we're not trying to make, police, fire, and municipal employees and strip their benefits from them because, police and fire have a dangerous job. They should have good health care. But we got to be reasonable. What can we afford to do? Yeah.
How many city employees live in Warwick now? It seems to me most of them don't.
I know the answer to that. 67% of all the city employees do not live in the city of Warwick. 67%.
Yeah, what do they care? A lot.
You just said something, got in my head when
They'll come back.
We'll come back. So, another thing too is we actually have more retired employees getting health care than we have active employees. It's almost 60% to 40%, and it's growing year after year. So, I just want to let you know, when we hear lifetime health care, free life, like what are we talking about? And this is what we're talking about. We have, there's so many convoluted different ways of this, different people can retire at different ages, but there's a lot of people in the city who can retire after 20 years, 25 years, or whatever. They could be 50, 55 years old. If they retire before age 65, when they're working for the city, they're paying a copay. I think it might be 18, 19, 20%. The day they retire, it becomes free. There's no copay. So they're receiving Blue Cross Blue Shield, husband and wife, prior to age 65, 100% paid for by the taxpayers. You're talking about $23,000 a year. So think about that for a second. You're like, say, 55 years old. You can retire. The city's going to pay for this for free. And a lot of people go out and get other jobs. So they're working another job somewhere, and they're paying nothing. So, I mean, this isn't fair. This isn't right. The city, council and the mayor, they don't want to talk about this thing. What's the other thing? When you hit 65, the taxpayers pay the full Medicare cost for husband and wife. On top of that, then we pay the cost for a Blue Cross Blue Shield supplemental plan for husband and wife for the rest of their lives. So let me just finish for a second. So we're not only paying, the full cost 100% before 65, we're paying 100% for all this. And when you look at this, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, our unfunded healthcare liability is about $400 million. So Rick, what did you have for a question?
What popped into my head was that when you say they got the best medical plans, there are other choices that the city should be trying to sell them, but they've got in their contracts it's going to be Blue Cross Blue Shield or the Equal, and there's no Equal is very.
I don't think you can name it anymore. I think they changed the law, but you're right about that. It's a top of the line plan, and the thing is, I don't think it's a lot for taxpayers to ask for people to pay a fair co-share for it. And I think we need to really take a look at, what. Can we really afford to be paying $68 million more in 9 years to give people free lifetime health care when we have all these other needs in the city? That's what we're talking about. We got people over here. I know Don. Don's 80-something years old. He's in his own house. I hate to talk about Don. He's on a fixed income. The elderly people are going to get totally destroyed in the city because the taxes are going to go up. Their pensions, and they don't get anywhere near this. This is another one I didn't talk about, but the prescription drug costs are capped at $600 for a family, husband and wife, in this city. It costs us about $5 million a year. Mayor Aberdeen put this in about, 10, 15 years ago. They never did an actuary report to find out what was this going to cost. I think they're trying to change it a little bit now to $700 or something. But this is ridiculous. I mean, I know elderly people who their prescription drug costs in 1 month are more than $600, and it's capped. So, these are the kinds of things that, our elected officials, they don't want to talk about that. And I just said that. Our unfunded healthcare liabilities are $400 million. So they're coming up with this great new plan, to fund this other post-employment benefits. I don't want to get too tactical, but the reason we're doing this, when you don't fund a plan, the government lets you, they call it discount it. It's almost like if you have money in the bank, you can get a certain interest rate, right? Well, if you have nothing in the bank for health care, you can't knock off that $400 million liability. If you stop funding it and put a little bit of money in, it's kind of ridiculous what they let you do, but then they let you not write off on paper a couple $200 million. They let you do a much higher, rate on your investments. I mean, you could put, $10, $25 million in an account. It's nowhere near $400 million, and you can knock your unfunded liabilities down by $200 million. It doesn't make sense. But, what I want to show you is that in 2015, we had a healthcare consultant come in, and I want to play this clip for you, and I want to let you listen to what this person said about the City of Warwick, and this was about 8 years ago.
at some point in time, there's going to be a point where we can't afford to pay our debts. And there's going to, because we can't generate enough income if we haven't already reached it now. But how do we figure out when that breaking point is with regard to expenses and debts and income? You know, there's only so much you can do to raise revenue and take out of your savings account. And then at some point in time, everybody's going to realize, oh no, we should have done something.
We could help you do projections and kind of come up with a solvency formula for you. That's not a problem. I would also think that the folks in your business office are capable of doing that as well. Have you hit that point? When you have a $24 million cost and you can only pay $7 million, I think your answer is there, honestly. I think we're there. I think we've been there for a long time. If I was running this business, and I don't know what you do, but if you were running a business in the private sector.
I'm an attorney and I run my own business.
Do you give your employees post-employment health insurance? Exactly. So, I mean, if I was running, if this was my business model, I would run away from it. The way these benefits are growing, and you're saying you have a 4% threshold, right? It's only a matter of time before that's claiming other resources that you need in other places.
So there is a way to calculate at some point.
The breaking point?
Yeah, the breaking point, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, in my opinion, it's simple math. I mean, you got a 4% growth. I mean, you factor in what might come into the economy, what might go out. I mean, a lot of that 4% is all, and when you look at it, it's all based on good days, not bad days. So, factor in the ups and downs in the economy and the revenue stream. It's just simple math.
When he talks about 4% growth, what he's talking about basically is
Thank you.
You're welcome.
He wants to see. I think there's a law we can only and go 4% higher each year, but we don't want maximum tax increases just every year. But what I found was interesting about him was that he said that the city can easily do this math. We could find out what it is. They won't do it. We've asked them to do it. We've asked them for a 5-year plan. They won't do a 5-year plan. Why won't they do it? Well, they come up with all these, there's a lot of variables and we can't do that. They could do it. They don't want you to see this. Could you imagine the outroar would be if on the Beacon we stop putting 5-year projections out there and let people know what the tax rates are going to be, right? And if you sat down with a financial consultant and they told you you're at your breaking point and things like that, wouldn't you do something about it? Right? This was 8 years ago. This guy came up.
Well, Bob, not to interrupt you, but the same thing happened on the school side. The school department.
Yeah,
the financial consultant.
Yeah, I got.
And the financial consultant.
Yeah, I have that in there too.
They hired.
Yeah.
Said you are a fiscal train wreck.
Yeah.
And the next day they gave out $8 million worth of raises.
Yeah. So that's true. And the thing is, this guy actually came up with a 10-point plan on how to reduce the healthcare costs, co-pays, eliminating it for future. Nobody followed this stuff. And I just want you to remember what he said, because I want to bring up what the other consultant said. And, my whole point of this is that our political leaders only listen to the consultants that support what they want to hear. You know what I'm saying? It's like the point Rob just made about the school department. They discredit those so-called experts that they hire because they don't agree with what they want to do. So the guy that, so we talk about racer on, we're already at our breaking point. He said he would run away from this. The consultant that's recommending this $68 million, I want you to listen to what he had to say. I don't know how many years ago. It might have been 5, 6, 7 years ago. He's been supporting the city pensions and doing reporting on it. And he's the one that recommended the $68 million of new revenue to fund this program. And let's hear what he has to say first.
We jump from $14.3 million in 2013 for a contribution to $24.2 million in 2020. That's sustainable in your opinion, or you can't make that opinion because you don't know? You don't look at that. I mean, you don't look at what we can afford to pay, correct?
Correct.
So if it's these two plans, plus the other plans, plus the health care, is outside the maximum we can raise for taxes, that's not something you look at. You just tell us what we have to pay.
Well, to answer the question directly, no, I do not look at that, or at least I do not worry about whether you can afford it or not.
The tax about that, right?
It's not my job or my charge to say whether the city can afford it or not. It's to tell you what your plan costs.
I mean, you know, to be quite frank, if we can't raise taxes enough to pay for one, never mind the other obligations in the health care, what good is the promises that we make to our employees? I think that's what a lot of communities are running into in Rhode Island.
So let's just contrast the statements, right? This is the guy that just came up with that $68 million plan. Doesn't look at the city budget, doesn't know that we need to build new schools. Rob Cody was at the meeting, we asked him all this stuff. He doesn't even talk to our financial consultants to see what, you know, we have invested in. And he's basically saying he doesn't worry about if the city can afford to make the payments. And, you know, I have a great analogy. It's kind of like, let's say everybody in this room wanted to buy a Bentley, right? This guy could tell you how much you have to pay a month to have a Bentley. He's not going to tell you can't feed your kids, you can't pay your mortgage, and you can't put gas in your car. But he'll give you a plan to buy a Bentley. That's what he's doing to the city of Warwick. He's saying, I got this $68 million plan. I don't know what the hell else you guys need in the city. I really don't care. It's not my job to see if we can afford that. So if we have to build a school and we have all these other things that we need to do, I'm not going to worry about that. You know, but I'll give you a plan, and if you keep putting all this money in, you'll be able to afford that $68 million. And that's what we've been doing for 20 years. This is the guy that advised us on how much money to put in the pension plan for all these years. No advice on maybe how to cut pension costs or how to cut healthcare costs. And the city leaders don't care about this. And this is the one thing that you gotta, get from the city leaders if you hear them talking. They always talk about, well, we made promises. We have to keep the promises. If you ever hear that from a politician, you know what you tell them? You know what you tell them? You're laughing because you probably heard that, right? Here's what you tell those politicians. How about the promises for good senior services? How about the promises for good roads? How about the promises for good education for our kids, right? Why is it you only nitpick on one promise that was made under false pretenses and ignore all the other promises that we need to have a good city to live in, right? That's what you tell them.
When they say we made promises, it's about we made promises to the bargaining unit.
That's true. So, many years ago, after Mr. Cerrone made those comments about de-escalating, there was two ways that the city could have gone. They could have renegotiated the retiree benefits, reduced the liabilities, required the retirees to pay their fair share. They could have done that. So my 2 years on the city council, I proposed major laws to get rid of lifetime health. The unions hated me. That's why they got rid of me after one term. Because the thing is, I could see this train wreck coming. The people, from Mayor Avedisian to Solomon to Mayor Picozzi right now, they don't want to touch this thing. They don't want to talk about the expense side. All they want is more money from you so they can pay for these benefits. Go ahead.
When you say retiree benefits, we have to renegotiate with retirees. If they're retired, where does that negotiation go? In the current contract?
No, I don't think it even goes in the contract. I mean, I don't want to get into all the technical things. We had Flanders here one time too, where actually, if you went under like receivership, you could just change all this stuff. Nobody has the will to even do something like this. But the thing is, the retired employees don't have a union anymore. You could unilaterally do that. They're going to probably take you to court. I think there's some Supreme Court rulings still going on in Rhode Island. They haven't resolved them all. But Rob, I don't want to get into all this now. But if anybody ever saw, I have it on my taxpayer spin. Judge Flanders came in, and it's remarkable to listen. He was up there for about 45 minutes, and he told people, everybody saw receivership as it's not a bad thing. It's a way that you could really get control of your finances and reorganize. And that's what he kind of recommended. So what did we do? What we decided to do is, the politicians in the city said we're gonna continue to provide these free lifetime health care, and they didn't care about the liabilities escalating each year, and they don't care that you have to pay more tax dollars, to say it bluntly. So what's going on? What's the other challenges for Warwick? We just talked about, like Rob made a good point. That's $68 million of new tax dollars. We're still paying $13 million a year on the city budget for every single year for the current claims for the city employees. You know what the school department pays? I don't know if anybody knows. Does anybody know the difference between the school department and the city for their health care? I know Rob knows. The school department at 65, it teaches off the system. They're totally on Medicare. The city doesn't pay anymore. We spend $500,000 on retired teachers' health care. We spend $13 million on the city. Think about that for a second.
When you say the city, you mean the fire, police, and...
Police, fire, municipal. Yeah. $13 million would pay what? Enough for your schools. Maybe. We could talk about the schools in a second. Right? But so what other challenges are we talking about? So we have all this, stuff that I just talked about, the retiree health care that we want to spend. City and school spending are increasing at unsustainable levels. I talked to you $10 million. Mayor Picozzi is on a spending spree. $33 million in 3 years, and along with the city council. This is unsustainable. You can't keep spending like this. Borrowing. How much is it going to cost us to build 2 new schools? Now, they delayed it a year, but I think this train is coming. I mean, Rob and I saw the figures. It's either between $13 and $19 million more. Remember what I told you? A maximum tax increase is $8.5 million? There's another $56 million bond, they passed a couple years ago. They released it. We haven't got the interest payments from that yet. Once they start releasing that, it's going to even get worse. We released not this past February, the February of 2022, $27 million in bonds for the city, the schools. I think it was about 2.5 million for the principal and interest. The 56 million is going to probably cost us $5 million. You add those together, you're almost at a maximum tax increase for just the principal and interest for those bonds alone. Then on top of that, if we do build the schools, it's going to cost you $13 to $19 million every single year in principal and interest.
That $13 to $19 million was best case and worst case scenario. That was prior to the third-party review,
yes,
which showed just on structural steel an additional $24 million from the original proposal, which those numbers were derived by.
Yep.
What are we going to do about it?
Well, we'll talk in a second about that. The other thing I want to talk to you about is this. How many people see these big giant pipes when you drive down Airport Road? Do you know what those are? Those are sewer pipes. You had that major sewer break, right?
The engineer did it.
They went out for bid on a project to fix that, right? They came back, the sewer authority thought it was going to cost $5 million to fix that sewer line. You know what it came back at? $15 million. $15 million. So, it's funny when you talk to the city council and the mayor and the people, well, that's an enterprise fund. I don't give a crap if it's an enterprise fund or not. I got to pay a quarterly payment for sewer fees, right? What do you think is going to happen when they have to make all these infrastructure repairs to your quarterly water and sewer bill, right? It's going to go through the roof. That's what's going to happen. And we had I don't know if you people are aware of this. Do you know Warwick only has one main water supply? It goes under 95. The other one, it broke down years back. They're trying to fix it now. If this other one under 95 ever goes, we're in big trouble. I don't know how much that's going to cost, but the former director of the water department said that we probably need $200 million in 20 years to fix the problem with the water lines alone. Well, no one's addressing that, right? Maybe we should talk to that guy, who wants to propose a $68 million. How could we, afford to do $200 million on infrastructure repairs? So, the purpose of this slide, I got the guy with the card under his sleeve. Our city leaders, they're creating an illusion that we have sound fiscal policy. You got Mayor Picozzi and his finance director and Steve McAllister saying, Warwick's in great shape. That's what you hear with them all the time. We talked about the budget. How could we be in great shape when we have a $10 million structural deficit, right? We basically took money. I told you, Mayor Picozzi and the council spent $33.3 million new dollars in 3 years. Where did all the money come from? And I said this in a previous presentation. The federal government's been bailing out Warwick, not only Warwick, across the entire country with all this COVID money. We're using all this COVID money to backstop all this new spending. It's running out. The problem that we have is that you used one-time funds for reoccurring expenses. You can't do that, and something's going to have to give with that.
How can they continue the line, though? I'm so
because nobody cares right now. We're gonna talk.
36% of the city of Warwick came out to vote. That's why.
Yeah.
36% of the voters came
Well,
out.
I'm gonna talk about that in a second. But what I want to tell you, so when you hear everybody's, oh, Warwick's great, you know, Rick Casella just told me some kind of online site said Warwick's the 12th best city in New England, or I don't know what that is about, but you know what I look at? There's a barometer that you could use, and it's in the financial report. This comes straight from the city financial report, and it's called net position. What net position? They said the difference between the city's assets and liabilities is one way to measure the city's financial health. It's kind of like what your net worth is. You take all your assets, your house, your car, whatever, and you subtract it from your debt. Are you in the black or are you in the red? And they say over time, increases or decreases in the city's net position are indicators of whether its financial health is improving or deteriorating. Well, I've been tracking this for about 20 years. This is the city of Warwick's net position. Right here. That's $549 million. Now, let me just explain something to you, because it looks like it was great up there. Back in 2006, 7, 8, 9, the laws allowed you not to have to put your pension unfunded liabilities on. So back in 2015, they finally said, you know, we got to stop being more transparent to the creditors. So that's why you went from there to there. That's kind of what was really happening. And then a few years later, they said, now you got to put your unfunded health care. So this really was kind of like where we were, you know, and you know, we're not doing well. And the reason I put this over here is that if we borrow $350 million for schools, plus the other $56 million, we're going to get close to $1 billion in unfunded liabilities. $1 billion. So if you really want to measure how well a city's doing, you look at this. And if you compare this to other cities, we're about right behind Providence is one of the worst cities in the state. And that's not me. That's coming from the auditor's report from me.
What's the state of your bond rating to keep on borrowing money?
Well, I know one of the things they've been talking about, you know, to put this new OPEB plan in, the $68 million, what they want to do is, I alluded to it before, S&P's been on Warwick's case. They said, you got to do something about, you know, your unfunded healthcare liabilities, the $400 million. That's part of this. And what they're going to do is, like, they're not going to tackle reforms and try to, you know, cut the expenses. What they're going to do is they're going to try to put money into this fund, so on paper they can knock off $100, $200 million. It's to me, it's a Ponzi scheme. I like to say this example. Let's just say you owed $400,000, right? You're in debt, $400,000. Some guy comes over to you and says, you know, if you put $2,500 in this special savings account, I can get the creditors to knock off $200,000 off your credit report. So you do that, you still owe the $400,000, you still got to make the monthly payments, right? But your credit looks better. So guess what you could go do? You go borrow more money, right? That's what they're trying to do. That's what Schaefer's plan is. He said it right from the beginning, that we got to get our financial house in order. What he meant by that is we need to do this scheme to put a little bit money into an account so we can knock this off on paper. Schaefer's going to be long gone. Pecosi will probably be long gone when these bombs start to hit on the taxpayers. Somebody else. And you know what? One of the problems we have, Barry, you could allude to this. Try to ask, you know, I got to say one thing about Mayor Avedisian. I didn't like Mayor Avedisian. I didn't like his policies and things like that. But the guy would stand up in the budget hearings and he would answer questions. You know for a fact that Mayor Pecosi won't answer any questions. He defer. I mean, I don't, and I'm going to say, I'm not getting, well, you know, I could get a little political. Mayor Pecosi is not qualified to be the mayor of the city. And we need to talk about what we can do, because guess what's happening in the next election? You're going to have a mayor for 4 years, yeah. And nobody knows this stuff. So my question to you is, you know, has Mayor Pecosi and the council performed their due diligence on this new health care fund or on the high schools? They haven't.
Well, they would never vote.
You know, we talked about this. I'm kind of regressing a little bit, but, you know, that new plan would cost you $7.5 million per year on average. That's a maximum tax increase. We talked about the new two new high schools. And annual expenditures are going up more than a maximum tax increase every year. And the problem is, why won't the mayor and the city council tell us how much our taxes are going to increase? Because you know what? We're the only ones complaining. Nobody shows up. They don't care. When no one runs against these people, they think like they're the kings of the city. They can do whatever the hell they want. You people all just a pain in the ass. Shut your mouth and go away. That's what they're saying, right?
Yeah. I was just going to say, many of the tax bills go right through the mortgage payment, so as your principal changes, you don't see the change.
Yeah, it's
You know,
it's the escrow
when
account.
changes,
Yeah.
It starts to flip.
Mhm.
You don't really feel the impact because it seems like the same thing.
Yeah. So, what's going on in the last couple of years? We're misleading, right? New high school construction, grossly underestimated. Schools recommended to hire consultants to reduce the budget over the years. Rob said a train wreck. Totally ignored. Property taxes. Remember they said they delayed them last year because the houses were going to come down? That was a bunch of bullshit, right? That didn't happen, right?
There was an election cycle.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if anybody knows about this. Does anybody know about this in the current budget? They changed the tax classification for small business. Anybody own a small business here? Nobody owns a small business? You own a small business? What you're going to see this year, they came up with this great scheme. Before the taxes were that your taxes could only be double of what the residential. They just changed it, so now it's going to be triple. So what they're trying to do is they're pushing the tax bill onto small business. The big box stores like Home Depot, Lowe's, and the others, they'll be able to handle that. But the small mom and pop stores, the restaurants and things like that, you might not see a big hit now. And what they tried to do, see, this is what they were afraid of. You know, anybody who owns a home, maybe like a raised ranch or something like that, worth $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, you got slammed with your assessment. What they were afraid of is that your taxes are going to go through the roof. I own a raised ranch. It's like, I don't know, it's 300 and something thousand. My taxes are going up $400. If they didn't do this, it would have gone up a lot higher. I didn't want them to do this because you know what I want them to do? You know how you control taxes? You control your spending. They're not controlling their spending. They keep coming up with schemes. And I'm going to tell you.
We need to do outside ice rink across. What's in that?
But that's the.
At Christmas time and have clean on.
But this is the issue here, Cindy. This is to your point. You know, we had, is it Laura Slocum, who's the head of, what's Laura at the head of? Is it the chamber or, I don't know.
Chamber of Commerce.
Rhode Island, she came over and she testified about this thing and she was opposed to it. I never saw her back at City Hall again during the budget hearings. Where are the small business people? Maybe they're too busy running their business. But the fact of the matter is that we need to start getting people involved and seeing what's happened here because, you know, the effects are going to be hitting them soon. I just talked about the infrastructure thing, right? The sewer pipe, it's 3 times its actual cost. We talked about the retiree health care plan. It's recommended by one person who admits he doesn't look at any other expenditures in the city or school budget. He doesn't examine what our financial advisors are for our pensions asset. And he publicly testified it's not his job to worry about if we can afford to pay the millions of dollars needed. This is what's kind of going on in the city.
It's really not his job, right? It's like if I go to buy a car somewhere, that guy doesn't care.
No, it isn't his job. His job's to tell you how much it costs. If you want to buy a Bentley, he can sit down and tell you what your monthly payment's going to be. You need to be smart enough to say, I need to feed my kids, right? I need to pay my heating bill. I need to put gas in. I can't afford a Bentley. That's not what the city leaders say. No, we could do this.
Hey, Bob, not to mention the fact that when he made this presentation, none of the council members even picked up on the fact that there was an increase over the 9 years of an additional $68 million. Bob and I sat and crunched the numbers in between each year's payout of post-employment benefits. We crunched the numbers and I got up and said, would you agree that in addition to what we're already paying over these 9 years, there'll be an additional $68 million? Yeah. Okay, would you agree that's about $7.5 million a year? Yeah. So if we have $13.5 million a year for schools and the $7.5 million a year for the additional plan for your post-employment benefits, that's $21 million. Would you agree? He said, yeah. I said, can you tell me how much money that the city can raise in a maximum tax increase? He said, I have no idea.
Yeah. I mean,
that's Peter Schaefer, Mayor Picosi's consultant. I have no idea.
Peter Schaefer said that?
No, the consultant.
Okay.
The consultant.
Did you tell him?
Of course I did.
well, you know, and the other thing I just want to tell you about that, kind of a little off topic, but that plan is backloaded. So in the later years, like the 7th, 8th, and 9th year, by the 9th year, you're talking 10, 12 million. Yeah. It's almost like they backloaded it. It's small now. It's kind of like the slow death, right? You put the frog in the boiling water, you're not going to notice it much. But as we stop picking it up, you know what, these council people are all going, everybody's gonna be going, there's gonna be this big bomb that's gonna blow up in the city, you know? So, I guess, so my question is, what's the solution to the problems in Warwick? I mean, anybody wanna throw some ideas out? I got some ideas I wanna throw out in a second.
To run people against them. People for people, but going to the meetings is just an exercise in futility. They treat you
Yeah.
like crap.
Yeah,
I mean, they're so rude.
yeah, I agree, Rick.
I think you have to obviously elect people that are gonna tackle some of these things that they're not willing to tackle. But also you have to be able to, I forgot what I was gonna say.
We need to inform people, but how do you do that?
Yeah,
The people are really hopeless. The Democrats have already defeated us because we have no hope. We don't believe our vote counts. When we go and we speak, we know you can't
they
be in
treat
City
us
Hall. We know. And so, when I was out campaigning, that's what I tried to do, is just bring hope to every door, you know? But the people do. They do feel defeated, and that's why there is such a low.
The only thing that your elected officials understand is public humiliation.
And
They
they
understand nothing
But
else.
then, you know, the mayor shows up at Rocky Point, and everyone's applauding him, there's a food truck there.
Well, I'm gonna
We
throw.
need to stop spending.
Yeah, I'm gonna just throw out a couple ideas, and I don't know if you remember this, but do you guys remember in 2019 when they said that they were gonna get rid of school sports? Remember that?
They always.
What? No,
Kids showed up.
but what did the kids do?
Times in school.
The kids.
Colin fixed it.
The kids showed up. I was at that city council meeting. It was their regular business. You had about a couple of hundred kids showed up. They totally stopped that meeting. They forced the council to suspend the rules, and the council was scared of what was going on and what they were doing. And guess what happened a couple weeks later with Solomon? They level funded them that year. They found $4 million that they gave to the school department. I think some of the school committee members manipulated the kids a little bit, but the whole point of the story, if you can get enough people, these council people are scared of new faces and new people coming in. They're not scared of you anymore because you show up too much.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But the problem is too, is that you go there and then they delay shit, they have all kinds of tactics. Not everybody can go sit for 6 hours to be treated like.
But you know what? I think like at this as a party, you got to start thinking like, what's the strategy that you can use, you know, to start getting more people involved. And you know, I was kind of half kidding to Barry because you know Barry's trying to do stuff to get people involved. I said, set up a table with some umbrellas and some free lemonade when people are paying their taxes on July 15th, and say, hey, it's about the only free thing you're going to get. But you might be able to get people's names and things like that might want to get involved or pass out a little flyer, you know? The other thing that we were talking about was, you know, go into McAllister's ward. We used to do this. Michelle used to do this. We would get the ward map. We'd break it down by, you know, 2 or 3 streets each. We just print out 2,000 flyers and you just drop them off at everybody's house. That scares the bejesus out of these people. I mean, the thing that we got to do is we got to get people involved, and you got to get people that, you know, candidates. The Republican Party to me is kind of like the last resort to kind of save the city. If we continue to go on with 7 of the 9 council people being unopposed, the mayor unopposed, forget it. You know, especially with this 4-year cycle. You know.
Hey, Rob, excuse me 1 second. When I started the Warwick Taxpayers Association in October, it was because I was frustrated with a lot of the same things you're speaking about. I came tonight, I've heard your presentation before, but I came because it's good to refresh it. But I'm hoping that the Republican City Committee will work with us who are in the Warwick Taxpayers Association to recruit candidates. To just give you an example, when I ran against Foley in September in the primary, Cynthia and I and our 2 grandsons went out in July, got signatures, knocked on doors, passed out flyers. We spent $3,000 on mailings and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, unless we get people who are committed to do that, this isn't going to change. I said it before, and I'll say it again.
You're right.
I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, but talking to the Democrats, believe me, you all know this, Joe Ciccacci, he could make Warwick a much better city if he wasn't the politician that he is. Joe McNamara, head of the Democratic Party in the state of Rhode Island. Just quickly, and I'm done. Roger Duran started that whole thing, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, about trying to expand the open meeting law to give us more of a chance to participate. Ciccacci, Foley, and McAllister have killed again this legislation session. So unless we can get people to go out and canvass, solicit people, You know, it's a year away. We're only a year away from the next election. And if we waste any more time and not do our best to solicit candidates, we may as well just stay at home.
Yeah.
So, when I ran last year, just like Lisa, I can tell you, Senate 30, the majority of the people are elderly. That's the maximum amount of people. And I can tell you what they were concerned about is why are they still paying school taxes when the kids have been out of school for years. They don't even know where the money's going. They are concerned about the electricity, as well as everyone else. They're also concerned, they are concerned the way the direction is going, but they know that their age prevents them to run, and their fear is nobody's gonna step up. So, I mean, I do agree that our big push this year will be to start getting people involved, because if they don't, and a lot of people told me that they weren't going out to vote. A lot of people voting, they said they will not vote unless it's a presidential election, they didn't care who was running.
Let me just, one thing, I think, I don't know, like, let me just ask you a question, and then we could go around again, like, do you kind of get the gist of what I'm talking about? This isn't over your head, right? Like, when I try to educate people on the issues that affect Warwick, I think, you know, for my presentation, like, what's your feedback? I mean, does this stuff make sense to me, what I'm saying?
It makes sense, it's just more people have to, I agree, more people have to start showing up, and you have to get the people, they have to understand how bad it is, and some people, they just don't. I think at this point, they're turning a blind eye to it, they're like, you know what, it's not gonna go anywhere, and we had to try to get them to realize that, right, people need to run, I agree, we need to start recruiting people, and I know, Russ has been talking to a bunch of people, Rick has talked to a bunch of people, I mean, we're definitely trying to get the people to step up.
We gotta educate people as to what's happening in the city, and if we don't make some changes, what's gonna happen?
So you, real quick, before you ask that question, this presentation's online, right?
I haven't put it online yet, I'm gonna put it online.
Okay, so we put it online, we can all, I mean, definitely share it to try to get the word out, because it's not coming here, not coming to other meetings, we can broadcast it, like word of mouth, just kind of spread it, and share. So, probably one or two more questions, and then I'm gonna wrap it up.
It's gonna be a tax-based bid?
Yeah, I'll put it on there, so we have.
It's not really a question, but it's kind of how I've been listening to a lot of this, like, over the months and weeks, especially with the school issue. And like you, at the beginning of your presentation, like, right now, we're already feeling the effects of previous administrations' misuse or misallocation of money. So now, especially with the schools, I can kind of understand in a simplistic, common sense way where the schools are disasters, and then you're at the point, like something in your house, is it worth it to fix it or worth just to buy a new one? I know it's an overly simplistic way of thinking, but I don't know if that's the position the city was in. And also on top of that, an elderly aging city, you know, you need to be able to attract new people to move here with their families, so I kind of understand that too.
Well, let me ask you, I want to answer your question, because the thing is, I've never said I'm against building new schools. What I want the city to do is get itself in a financial position where you can build new schools. You don't do all this stuff and all this out of control spending, $33 million in 3 years, a new $68 million. If you were going to put an addition on your house, I don't think you're going to be going all, you know, and spending, buying a new boat and doing all these other things. They don't care. They don't care how much all this stuff. We're not financially prepared to take on these big challenges. And what are they doing? They're putting together a new program. And you weren't here. We got a new program in Warwick. It's going to cost us $68 million in 9 years to fund this program for free retiree health care. We spent $71.5 million in new tax dollars over 20 years in the city budget. How could anybody who's a logical person say that that is going to work when you're going to spend about the same thing on one item in 9 to 10 years that you spent on the entire city budget in 20 years? You know, so let me go back to you. All right, and thank you very much for having me.